The Story Without a Name by Barbey Chapter 11. 25 years later, Madame de Frejol, who had survived her daughter, and whom, as she said of herself, nothing could kill, was dining one evening with the Count de Lude, a relative of her, and, parenthetically, one of the most charming hosts in St. Sauveur, where, as may be remembered, there had been plenty of dancing before the Revolution, and where she herself had danced with the white officer, her black angel who put her in mourning for the rest of her life. At that time dancing had ceased, autre temps, autre mort, but dining had not. In place of contra dances were large repasts. It was at one of these that Madame de Frejol assisted. Doubly aged by grief and by years, severer in piety than ever, almost a saint, if pitiless a saint there can be, it was surprising enough to find her amid the gaiety of a dinner table. She was there, however, endowed, as she has been seen, with the unusual strength of character, inimical to any form of affection. She had re-entered the world to which she had belonged, long after the death of her daughter, it is true, but she had re-entered it, and had renewed her relation with a simplicity and sobriety of her own. Buried in her heart was the memory of the unforgettable secret which her daughter had died without revealing, and that memory was as a cancer to her. She hid it. She gave no sign, but it gnawed ceaselessly at her breast. No one ever suspected what she knew of her daughter's life, but what made her suffer most was not what she knew, but what she did not know. Was she ever to know? She had no hope of it. Meanwhile, inwardly despairful, outwardly composed, she continued to live. She was but a ruin like the Colosseum, one that had its grandeur and its majesty. At the end of the table where she sat there was less laughter and loud talking than the other. Her seriousness commanded respect. The dinner itself was lively and agreeable, though the guests were terribly mixed. It offered an epitome, a portrait of society such as the Revolution and the Empire had made, a reunion, as the Count de Lude put it, of the three classes. The clergy was represented, the nobility, and the third estate. Between the Marquis de Lamure, an aristocrat to her fingertips, and the Marquis de Pont-l'Abbé, whose title was as old as the hills, was a Norman peasant, a superb-looking fellow, be it said, who got rid of his native uncouthness and had become an authentic Parisian bourgeois. And there, between the Marquis and the Marquis, like a silver escutcheon between its two supports, of which one, the Marquise, was the unicorn, and the other, the Marquis, the greyhound. Each year he came to St. Sauveur on a vacation, for he enjoyed the leisures of wealth, the wealth which he would willingly have lost solely for the pleasure of regaining it. He was bored. He had a special complaint, the homesickness of a retired merchant. In trade he had been a grocer, but a grocer of the highest class. He had been a grocer to His Majesty Napoleon, Emperor and King in the fairest days of the latter's glory, and his shop, which disappeared with the others on the Place du Carrousel, stared for 10 years without blinking, straight into the eyes of the Tuileries, which is gone too. All imperial grocer that he was, he had neither the name nor the appearance of a tradesman. He had a name that would have suited a general, Bataille. In appearance, Providence made him one of the handsomest men of the epoch, and almost every man was superb, men whom David and Géricault have painted, perhaps for our own humiliation. Among the cooks he was known as the good-looking grocer of the Carrousel. His name fitted his looks. His bearing was so military that at night, when his clacking coat, he surprised the sentinels into saluting him as they salute a general. And that salute he returned like a general, with a gravity and pompousness which delighted his friends. For a moment he really was the general, but one who became the grocer at once. He had no brains. He had not an idea in his head, a fact which at age 60 perfectly explained his excellent health. But he was shrewd, as a Norman ever is. The fall of the Empire did not injure him. He abdicated from his shop as Napoleon from the Empire, only, unlike the latter, there was no return from Elba. He died very peacefully in 1830 of cholera. Such was the individual whom chance and revolution had placed at the dinner table of the Count de Lude in front of Madame de Frejol. On that day, in honor of the host, he wore his finest apparel, a blue coat with gold buttons, white knee breeches, silk stockings, and high-heeled shoes. He had been always aware of his good looks, and his good looks were not impaired by his tailor. He was still relatively young, strong, supple, and fair, with that fairness that recalls the Scandinavian origin of the Normans, but which was apparent not in his hair, which was as white as a wig of an albatross, but in his skin and his fresh coloring. His style was neither good nor bad. He had none. Where could he have got any? From the cooks to whom he sold ponies of brandy every morning? In this respect his ignorance was like that of M. de Corbière, who put his tobacco-spotted handkerchief on the king's desk. Bataille would have not put his, a silk one, scented at that, on the Count de Lude's table, but he had put a snuff-box there, a very handsome one, with a miniature on it of his son, a horrid little beast, who did not in the least resemble his father, and whom his father affectionately entitled Battleson. It was in connection with the snuff-box, passed to one of the guests who had asked to examine the miniature, that the Marquis de Pontlevis caught sight of an emerald on the little finger of the hand extended before him. "See here, Bataille," he exclaimed, "you must be deuced vain to wear a ring of such beauty and value. Where in the world did you get such a marble?" Bataille laughed. "You could never guess. 50,000 crowns to 25 louis that you can't." "What nonsense!" Pontlevis incredulously retorted. "Try and guess, then," answered Bataille. The old Marquis reflected for a moment, and sought, but probably did not find, a supposition decent enough to hazard before such a redoubtable devotee as Madame de Fargeul, who, in the eternal gnawing of her cancer which was eating her heart, paid no attention whatsoever. "Well," said Bataille at last, "I took it from a robber. I gave him the change for his coin. The robber was robbed. It was odd enough. How would you like to hear how it happened?" "Yes," answered the Count de Lude. "Tell us the story. It will help us on the Chambertin."